Hello, my name is Michael Lambert, and today I want to talk a little bit about Liz Truss, about the lady who's going to lead us out of all our difficulties and make everything right because she gets things done. But it's not what I had planned to talk about. I wanted to talk a bit about all the people who we don't hear much about, the people who don't complain about the current cost of living crisis. You know, we're all hearing all the time about people can't feed their children, they can't afford the rent, and they can't afford all this, that, and the other, and it goes on and on and on. And these other people, they don't complain at all. I'm thinking, for example, about people who stepped in and supplied the nation with PPE at our moment of need. People who, you know, new government ministers and were able to get these enormous contracts and were able to supply PPE, very often stuff that was out of date or wasn't appropriate and was wasted and so on. But as I say, you don't hear them. People like Michelle Mone, you know, she lives in the Isle of Man, I think probably for the weather, but people like her who got a very big contract because she happened to know Michael Gove, and people like friends of Matt Hancock, and particularly Priti Patel, who got a contract after emailing various ministers on behalf of a friend of a friend. And in addition, there also, I think we should think of all these people who are partners of these big accountancy companies who so bravely stepped in and provided all these thousands and thousands and thousands of consultants to consult on how you run test and trace, whilst Dido Harding was doing her very best to throw away as much money as she possibly could. It seems she only got rid of 20 billion, but I mean, nobody knows where it went, except a lot of it went to these consultants who, of course, the partners of these big companies are now, of course, paying themselves absolute fortunes in bonuses. I was going to also mention about some of these people, these tax exiles. I mean, all they do is they make some money and they don't want to pay tax on it, so they go and live somewhere else. I mean, it's perfectly understandable. Think that nice Bernie Ecclestone. I mean, HMRC really hounding this man. He's 91 years old, and they're taking him to court because they say he tried to hide £400 million from the taxman so he wouldn't have to pay tax on it. And I mean, I presume he's declaring his 3.5 billion fortune, but to put him through that, I mean, it's very unfair, doesn't it? And there's just so many of them. I was going to talk also about the 600 civil servants in Whitehall who are paid £150,000 a year or more, and all the bosses of TfL, the bosses of things like Network Rail. I mean, the guy who's in charge of Network Rail, he gets nearly, I think, 650,000 a year. But you never hear any of them complaining. I also wanted to mention Nadim Zahawi, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now, he, a few years ago, completely accidentally, I mean, it was obviously a terrible mistake, back in 2013, he claimed £5,277, a portion of which was for heating his stables. And I think he had somebody living in the yard in a caravan, and they were heating the caravan as well. So he claimed this money on his expenses. When it was found out, I mean, he said, the word he used himself was he was mortified at being found out, and he paid some of the money back. So I thought I'd have a little look at his expenses, actually, and I was quite interested to have a look to see that he paid something like £7,000 for maintenance of a website which he's got. Now, a lot of MPs have got, well, they've all got websites, and a lot of them are very standard, basic websites, nothing very complicated, very cheap to create and cheap to run. But it seems that over a couple of years, Zahawi has spent about £7,000 on having this website maintained. And it seems, I looked into this a little bit, it seems that the website was set up by a guy called, I think he's called Richard Mole. Now, he kind of works, or seems to be quite close to another MP called Mike Penning. And this guy, Richard Mole, he had a company called Butter Mountain. And he used this company to get contracts with, I think, about 30 MPs, including Ian Duncan Smith, Alok Sharma, and Charles Walker, and all sorts of MPs. And he was charging them all these exorbitant amounts for looking after their websites. And the quite interesting thing which I did come across is this, that this Mike Penning, he paid this Richard Moll, he paid him about £20,000, £24,000, £24,500 over 2 or 3 years for what he described as political services and web hosting. Now, I don't know quite how a Member of Parliament could justify paying £25,000 and claiming on expenses for political services and for hosting his website. But what was quite interesting is that on the 12th of April 2021, he paid this company, Butter Mountain, £9,919. But unfortunately, Butter Mountain was dissolved 4 months earlier. So he's paid to a company that didn't exist. 9,900 of public money, of course, it's our money. And all the others, there are apparently about 30 MPs paying this guy Mole to look after their websites. Many of them were paying after that company was dissolved. But whilst I was looking at Zahawi's expenses, I noticed something quite interesting. It really tells you a little bit about how these people's minds work. Zahawi is very successful. He formed YouGov, made a fortune out of that, and since then he's gone into property and he owns a lot of property. It's said that he's worth between 20 and 100 million pounds. It's a lot of money. Now, if you assume that he would get at least 2.5% return on his, let's say he's only worth 20 million. If you assume that he gets a return of 2.5%, that means his income from his property will be about 1.2 million a year. Plus, he's got a salary, of course, as a minister of 150,000, as a chancellor, 150,000 a year. Excuse me. So he's got a total income, let us say, before tax of about £1.4 million a year. That works out at about £27,000 a week. Now, looking through his expenses, on the 2nd of July last year, he claimed £1.84 for a 2-mile return journey, travelling 4 miles. 16th of July, he charged £1.40 for travelling 3 miles. 10th of September, he went a long journey, 6 miles, and he charged £3.11. 26th of November, 6 miles, £2.84. I don't know why the earlier journey of 6 miles was more expensive than the later journey of 6 miles. There's a 37p discrepancy. Maybe somebody should look into that. But what sort of person is earning £27,000 a week before tax and is taking the time to go and look at the mileometer on the car before setting off on a journey of 1.5 miles, and then checking it on the way back, calculating they've done 3 miles, and then going in and actually submitting a claim for £1.84, £1.40. I mean, he's not exactly hard up, is he? And I think this is just, I don't know, I suppose it's because it's public money and it's there and you might as well have it. But it's awfully shabby, isn't it? Really shabby. But anyhow, as I say, I didn't really want to talk about those things. That's what I was going to talk about. But I would like to talk a little bit more about Truss, because Truss truly is, I mean, it's frightening. I mean, the woman is, she's going to end up, I mean, she will say anything to anybody to pursue her career. I mean, she's just like Johnson. The only thing that matters is her getting to Downing Street, her pretending she's Margaret Thatcher. And she's not even a million miles within Thatcher in terms of stature, ability, and all the rest of it. She's a weak, sort of wishy-washy, shallow person who's forever flip-flopping, forever changing her mind, forever U-turning. And I just looked back through this campaign, and I just wanted to comment on what you think she'd said. Very early on, I think probably before the campaign started, she was on Sophie Rayworth's Sunday morning programme, and she said that when she was asked, she said she would be all in favour of English people who wanted to go and fight in Ukraine doing so. Well, there are 2 English people who did go to fight in Ukraine, and they're both in a prison in Russia right now, having been sentenced to death. And she thought that was fine. If people wanted to go, they should go. Rachel McLean, who's a woman who's her title is Under Secretary of State for Safeguarding. I have absolutely no idea what being an Under Secretary of State for Safeguarding is. What she's safeguarding, I have no idea. But she said, nice lady, she said, people struggling should get a better job or work longer hours. When Truss was asked about this, she said that the conversation, the interview, mischaracterised. And she was asked again. She said yes, it had been mischaracterised. And when pressed on it, she said she hadn't seen the interview. She said about helping people who are struggling. She said, this is during the campaign, she said, the way I would do things is in a conservative way of lowering the tax burden, not giving out handouts. In other words, she doesn't want to help people who desperately need help. She wants to help people who pay tax, which of course the people she's canvassing, the old folk in the hustings that she's been going around on all this time. When she was challenged about that, she said she'd been misinterpreted. Those were the words. I'm quoting the words. The way I would do things is in a conservative way of lowering the tax burden, not giving out handouts. When she was challenged about it, she says, I was misinterpreted. She says that giving handouts is Gordon Brown style economics. She wanted to cut the pay of civil servants working in the provinces. When she was challenged about that, she said she'd been misinterpreted, having done a complete U-turn on it. A complete U-turn. She said, as I said last week, she wants to unleash business now that we're out of the shackles of the EU. She wants to transform the economy into, just like Johnson, a high-skilled, high-pay economy. She wants to unleash businesses. And when asked about firing nuclear weapons, she said, yes, she'd have no hesitation whatsoever. It's just part of the job. And she's ready to invoke Article 16 to override the Northern Ireland Protocol, which will almost certainly lead to some sort of trade war with the EU at a time when we are desperately short of food. We're not short of food, where we're having food shortage, we're going to be desperately short of food, where things are extremely difficult. She wants to, and where we're struggling to do business abroad anyway, particularly with the EU now that we don't want to deal with them anymore. But to start a trade war seems beyond insanity. You remember her speech? She gave a speech and she said, that stupid, that gormless sort of grin she's got, that absolutely empty grin. UK imports 2/3 of our apples, 9/10 of our pears, and 2/3 of our cheese. This is a disgrace. And everybody fell silent. What a dimwit. She said, she talked about our Baltic allies across the Black Sea. As Foreign Secretary, she said that. And then she went to Cheltenham during the hustings and she said, we need to get on with making the small nuclear reactors which we produce here in Derbyshire. So she thinks Cheltenham is in Derbyshire. Even when she gave her speech when she was announcing her grand announcement of her candidature, the fact that she was going to stand, she couldn't find her way out of the room. She walked around with that gormless grin on, that grin that sort of says, I think I got away with it, they're all clapping. And she wandered around the room, couldn't find the door to get out. She said, the woke culture in the civil service strays into anti-Semitism. What does that mean? And then in terms of setting up her standing as Prime Minister, so she'll be able to deal with foreign powers and foreign countries and nearby countries, she said that Nicola Sturgeon was an attention seeker. This is a woman who has put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of photographs of herself on Twitter and on Instagram. I'm hesitant about actually commenting on anyone's appearance, but she's not what you would call a looker. She's not really, she's not Cindy Crawford, is she? And yet there's this constantly putting a photograph out. And yet she says Nicola Sturgeon's an attention seeker. And she says she would ignore her. How does that help future relations with Scotland? She said Mark Drayford, who's the First Minister in Wales, she said that he was low energy Jeremy Corbyn, and she will crack down on his negativity. I mean, what's the point in insulting somebody you're going to have to work with? And how is she going to crack down on his negativity? What's she going to do? She's going to arrest him? It's just senseless. And then, as we know, yesterday, or not yesterday, the day before yesterday, she was asked at a hustings by that brewer woman. She was asked, is Macron a friend or a foe? And she said with that ridiculous smile on her face, the jury's out on that. Now, she said it because, like everything else she says, she just has an audience in front of her who will enjoy it. And of course, they all loved it. They were all clapping and laughing and wonderful. And she was smiling away, so pleased with herself. And the result of that is, of course, it's all over Europe. The whole of Europe is saying the incoming Prime Minister of the UK doesn't know whether Macron's a friend or a foe. Macron was interviewed about it, wasn't he? He was on a visit to North Africa somewhere, and he was as diplomatic as he could be, saying that he thought the British people were fine, but questioned their leadership. And so it is. But this woman, you see, what you see throughout is she will just say anything to anybody, and all these things these stupid things she's been saying, it's all just to get the favour of the people in the room because they're the ones who are going to vote for her. And when she gets into Parliament, week after next, and she is the Prime Minister, she's going to appoint a lot of right-wing people, and she's going to have to please them. And so this government is going to go more and more to the right, and this is really frightening. Yet this woman's going to be a puppet of the ERG, people like Rees-Mogg and all these other extremists. And like Johnson, I mean, if he hadn't been so stupid, he could have stayed as long as he wanted, as long as he kept the right wing of the Tory Party happy, and that's all she's going to have to do. So she's going to be pushed around, bossed around, and we're going to have running the country behind this puppet. We're going to have all these really right-wing extremist conservatives. And it's dreadful. I mean, we're in this sort of state. It's all to do with our system, whereby the Tory Party elects a leader in the event of a leader being or a vacancy becoming available. But it's not great. We're going to have, as I say, a dim-witted, really rather ridiculous woman running. You know, there's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, and I'll read you what it is actually because it describes it perfectly. The Dunning-Kruger effect it's quite famous and it's sort of believers. Dunning-Kruger effect in psychology is a cognitive bias whereby people with limited knowledge or competence in a given intellectual or social domain greatly overestimate their knowledge or competence in that domain relative to objective criteria or to the performance of their peers or of people in general. And that's her. You know, she thinks he's Thatcher Mark too. It's pathetic, but we're all going to pay the price, and I think there's going to be just utter chaos. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to say, I keep talking about food shortages, and I'm really quite concerned above everything else about food shortages and people just being unable to afford food this autumn. But there's also something else I think we should be concerned about, because I think an inevitable consequence of people being unable to afford to eat and so on is that people will tend to resort to crime. And I think there's a great risk that this country is going to descend into some sort of criminal country. And I think you're going to get gangs and you're going to get people resorting to all sorts of crime, extortion and theft and burglary and all the rest of it. And just one thing that cropped up that I noticed last week was concerning the boat people coming across the channel. Now, as I made clear before, I think if somebody comes from Afghanistan because they're in fear for their life, and whether they're a young man or not, whether they've got a portable telephone or not, if someone comes from Afghanistan or someone comes from Iran because they're escaping to save their lives, then I think we should be much more sympathetic and do what we can to help, as we usually do. But apparently quite a lot of people who've been coming here recently, quite a significant proportion, are Albanian. Albania is not a dangerous country. Having spoken to people who've been there, it's apparently quite a pleasant country, but it's quite poor and so on. But one of the things that the Albanians are famous for, and quite famous for, is their mafia, their crime. And I'm kind of wondering why so many Albanians are coming here, and if some of them are not necessarily organised criminals, and I suspect it's quite possible that they are. In Italy, where the home of the mafia, apparently in Rome, I read not long ago, the Albanian mafia have taken over, and because they are so ruthless and they're so violent, the Italian mafia have backed off and left it to them. And I think this is something we should be really concerned about. If it were me, any Albanian arriving here, I would say you've come from a perfectly safe country, and I'd take all their money, take their phone, and I'd put them on the next plane back to Tirana. But I just mentioned it, I noticed it, and I thought it was worth mentioning. Now, last week I did get over 1,000 comments, for which I'm extremely grateful. I'm always very grateful. And once again, as I said many times before, I do apologise for not responding, but I just don't have the time, so I don't reply to any. But unfortunately, I'm sorry to say that there weren't any really crazy ones this week, so I haven't got anything to read out. So I've no doubt there will be some next week. All I have to say, as I'm saying now, is that Brexit was the stupidest thing that this country's ever done, and anybody who still believes that Brexit was a good idea or that Boris Johnson was a good Prime Minister is extremely stupid, and no doubt there'll be plenty of people who want to respond to that. So if you watched this far, thank you very much, and if you haven't subscribed, I really would appreciate it, and if you wouldn't mind clicking the thumbs up, and until next time, bye for now.